In this series, we strive to determine the odds of surviving certain events. In this video, we take a look at the odds of surviving Squid Game. Squid Game is a competition between hundreds of competitors. This number in the hundreds will be represented by contestants C. One way to determine your likely success rate may be to take the probability of 1 over C. This shortcut treats all contestants the same, however, ignoring factors such as luck and skill. Instead, we can determine the odds of surviving each individual round, all factors included. In the 2021 release of Squid Game, contestants went through multiple deadly games, including red light, green light, the honeycomb game, tug of war, marbles, the glass bridge, and finally ending with the Squid Game. There are also intermittent opportunities for contestants to directly eliminate each other. We will be ignoring that and the opportunity given to the contestants to leave the game halfway through. We'll tackle each of the 6 games individually. We'll start with red light, green light, in which contestants are forced to obey the laws of the classic game. If they are unsuccessful, they are shot to death. For this game in particular, C does not seem to matter as much. This game is less about outcompeting others and more about surviving on your own. We'll assign C0 to be the initial number of contestants. C1 will be the number following the first round, C2 will be the number to follow the second round, and so on. Considering the nature of the first game, it's possible that a high C0 will result in a low C1. It's also possible a low C0 could result in a relatively high C1. For the first game, there are a handful of variables to be mindful of. All contestants start on one end of a long yard. The distance they must cover, D, the time they have to do so, T, the average speed of a contestant, S, and the number of stoppages and their length of time. In the show, C0 is 4:56, T is 5 minutes, and we'll approximate D to be about 150 meters. 56% of players, or 255, were eliminated, resulting in a C1 of 201. In terms of calculating the odds of survival, we should also consider the methods to survive. One strategy involves hiding behind another contestant. Relying on this strategy hinges on the chosen body shield's ability in the game. Another technique involves going slow and steady, essentially refraining from overextending and ensuring that you maintain the ability to stop at a moment's notice. With this in mind, we can determine the minimum speed required to complete the event, D over T. In our example, this would be 150 meters over 5 minutes, or 0.5 meters per second. Obviously, for the average person, this pace is laughable. However, some of the devoted 5 minutes is taken away with red lights. We'll say that the doll takes about 3 seconds to scan the field every 10 seconds, or m seconds to scan the field every n seconds. Therefore, the new time would become n minus m over n times t. With our example numbers, it would be 210 seconds. It also takes time to eliminate contestants. If only one person needs to be eliminated at a time, it would only take about 5 seconds. However, if multiple people are eliminated in one go, it would take those 5 startup seconds plus y s over p. We'll go with the 0.33 s over p, or seconds per person. Using our approximation of eliminations of 56% of C0, the extra time would be 0.33 s over p times 56% z0 times p. In our example, it would be 0.33 times 255 equaling 85 seconds. Therefore, the time allotted to run the 150 meters is reduced further to 125 seconds. Still, 1.2 meters per second isn't too big of a deal. The average walking speed is right around this figure, so even just walking would allow a contestant to finish on time without the risk of overextension. If one lengthens their strides and lowers their body of gravity, they may be able to traverse longer distances during green lights while maintaining the ability to stop quickly on red lights. So, if one employs this method, they should be okay. The next hurdle is avoiding detection of movement during red lights. The approximate amount of red lights is solved by t minus y times 56% C0. over n. In our example, that would come out to 300 minus 0.33 times 56% of 456 over 10, which is 22 stoppages approximately. We'll say that the first round ends with a W% survival rate for each stoppage. Of course, this would only apply to those employing the strategy. The overall survival rate would then be A equals to 0.W to the 22nd power percent. If W is 99, A becomes 0.80 or 80%. Game 2 will start with C1 contestants. The next game revolves around sugar honeycombs. The objective of the game is to carve out a specific shape using nothing but a needle without cracking the honeycomb. Players that crack the honeycomb or are unable to finish within the time limit are eliminated. The first thing to consider odds-wise in this game is that there are 4 unique shapes. These 4 options are a triangle, circle, star, and umbrella. The most favorable method to employ by far is one in which a contestant licks the honeycomb to make carving it easier. It doesn't matter if you break apart the outside of the shape as long as the shape itself remains intact. Like the first game, this game isn't so much a competition but an individual test. In the show, 42% of competitors were eliminated, dwindling a C1 of 187 to a C2 of 108. The odds invariably change depending on the shape. We'll presume the difficulty from hardest to easiest to be the umbrella, the star, the circle, and finally the triangle. If we determine there to be a certain error percentage associated with each line, we can use that to predict the probability of each shape. In this game, T is 10 minutes. Next, we'll determine the number of lines required to complete each shape. Although this may not be true, we'll determine the perimeters of each shape to be equal. Starting with the triangle, one must cut 3 lines. For the circle, if one of the triangle lines is n, we'll approximate the circumference of the circle to be 3n, or n is equal to 2/3 pi times r. For the star, although they are shorter in length, there are 10 lines. The umbrella has the most segments and intricacy. We'll approximate the number of lines or curved segments to be roughly 17. Now that we know the approximate number of lines for each shape, we can determine the lines per minute required for success. The more lines per minute required, the more an error is likely. H will represent the number of lines for each shape. If we base our error percentages around lines carved with 1 minute, we can adjust for each shape through the following equation of B is equal to G over H, where G is the expected percentage of successful lines per each line carved with 1 minute. Once we factor in the 1/4 chance of getting each shape, there become 4 separate B values. For the triangle, it's G over 3. For the circle, it's G times 3 over 2 pi r, and r can be equal to 1. For the star, it's G over 10. For the umbrella, it's G over 17. The next game of Squid Game is Tug of War. This game started with a C2 of 80 and ends with a C3 of 40. In this game, teams of 10 must participate in a game of tug of war. Although there is plenty of strategies to employ before and during the game, the odds are simply a 50-50. So this game's odds is a C equal to 50%. The next game is Marbles. This game started with a C3 of 39 and ended with a C4 of 17. In the show, one of the contestants did not participate due to a lack of an opponent. The goal of the game was to win or gain your opponent's 10 marbles within the time limit. The time limit T for this game was 30 minutes. In the case of a draw or simply a lack of a victor, both players are eliminated. If both players agree to a game, finish that game, and one of the players manages to collect all 20 marbles in the 30-minute span, the player with the marbles wins. If we assume ourselves open to a fair game, we should have a 50% chance of winning said game. However, if we are paired with someone who refuses to cooperate or agree to a game, we may be out of luck. Since there were 38 participants and 22 eliminations, there were 3 extra eliminations in the form of the double elimination. If we accept that only one non-cooperative person was in each match, then there are a total of 3 non-cooperatives, or 3 out of 38 participants, which comes out to 7.9%. Therefore, this game's odds becomes D equal to 0.921 times C3 times 50%. Alternatively, the percentage of cooperatives could be represented by a variable, so D in this case would be K times C3 times 0.5 or 50%. The next game comes in the form of glass stepping stones. In this game, players must jump across multiple planes of glass. There are 18 points at which the player next in line must guess between 2 panels of glass. One is tempered glass and the other is normal glass. One option is safe and the other leads to falling. Players are numbered 1 through C4. In the case of the show, C4 was 16. There are multiple methods one could employ. When their turn is up, they could simply refuse to go. When this occurs, the person behind them could push them onto the next pane. Regardless, we'll assume the players go in order as they are assigned. We'll determine the likelihood of the amount of glass panes broken. In our analysis, the number of panes broken will equal the number of eliminations. If a player's number is greater than the number of eliminations, they survive. Otherwise, they are one of those eliminations. Next, we'll determine the number of eliminations, starting with 0. For 0, the calculation goes 18 choose 18 times 1 over 2 to the 18th power, which is 1 over 262, 144, or 0.000038%. For 1 elimination, the odds become 0.0000687%. This generalizes to x being 18 choose 18 minus x, or 18 factorial over 18 minus x factorial times 1 over 2 to the power of 18 minus x times 1 over 2 to the power of x. For the player's survival odds, it's simply the summation of the current odds and the prior odds. Next, there is an equal chance one is a player anywhere from 1 to C4. We have to determine the point at which player X is guaranteed to survive. That is player 19, as there are 18 possible eliminations. So, if C4 is greater than 18, that will lead to a guaranteed number of survivors to the amount of C4 minus 18. To determine anyone's particular odds, there are 2 options. For a C4 greater than 18, there is a C4 minus 18 over C4 chance of guaranteed survival. For the other cases where X is between 1 and 18, the odds of survival are the summation of the current and prior odds until X plus N equals 0, or 18 minus X minus N equals 18. In other words, X equals minus N. To summarize the odds, E equals C4 minus 18 over C4 if C4 is greater than 18, plus 1 over 18 times each summation, or the particular number the contestant was assigned. The final game is Squid Game itself. As there are only 2 participants and there must be 1 winner and 1 loser, the odds of F equals 50% is the probability. Next, we total the odds. A times B times C times D times E times F. So ultimately 0.W to the 22nd power percent times G over H percent times 50% times K times C3 times 50% times C4 minus 18 over C4 times 100% plus 1 over 18 and the summation equation times 50%, where W is one's expected percentage of stoppages resulting in moving. G is the expected amount of lines drawn without error per each line carved with 1 minute. H is the shape's minutes per line. C3 is the amount of people left to begin the marbles round. K is the percentage of cooperative players in the marbles round. C4 is the amount of players left to begin the glass stepping stones round. And X is the players' number between 1 and 18. We can explore this equation through inputting various numbers. To test the equation, let's say W is 98, G is 80, H is 3, C3 is 40, K is 90, C4 is 18, and X is 12. Under these conditions, one's survival becomes 64.12% times 26.67% times 50% times 18% times 88% times 95.1% times 50% equal to 0.64%, compared with 1 over 456 being 0.219%. There is approximately a 4 times greater chance using these methods.